action. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. As I mentioned in my last video, today we are going to be talking about my reading stats from 2022. I wanted to start with looking at my StoryGraph summary. This past year, I attempted to maintain Goodreads, StoryGraph, and my own reading spreadsheet all at the same time throughout the year. However, I'm trying to move away from Amazon as much as I can despite being a Kindle Unlimited user. So I really am focusing on StoryGraph for 2023 and maintaining my own reading spreadsheet. So without further ado, let's get started with my 2022 reading wrap-up data and information. Okay, starting off strong with our contents. For the mood and the pace of the books that I read, according to StoryGraph, a majority of the books were adventurous and emotional. That checks out because most of the books were either happening in space and a romance or were just romances. So with the sci-fi romance aspect, I can see how they would consider that to be adventurous. I also have quite a few lighthearted books. I'm not sure that I would categorize the romances that I read as being lighthearted. I'm an emotional person, so I tend to cry when I'm reading romance novels. So I'm not sure that I would mark them as lighthearted necessarily, but this is more of a description of what all of the StoryGraph users have chosen to describe the books as they've read them. That's really what makes it more community-based. For the pace, I would definitely agree with this. We have most of my reads being fast-paced books. That is certainly the case. I tend to read very fast-paced romances that I can knock out in one sitting. That makes it easier for me to get through as many books as I do, number one. And number two, I tend to find authors that I like and then read through their entire backlist. Next up, we have page number as well as whether the books were fiction or nonfiction. Most of the books I read were fewer than 300 pages. I wish that StoryGraph broke this down a little bit differently. I understand why they have the 500 plus and the 300 to 499 bracket, but I wish that there was a 200 to 300 marker, or even I'd say like a 150 to 200. I consider novellas to be under 150 pages and short stories to be under 50 pages. So that's how I break it down. That might not be what everybody thinks when they're looking at the length or the page number of a book, but looking at the StoryGraph breakdown, I do wish that they broke down the under 300 apart a little bit more. In terms of fiction and nonfiction, that does check out. I typically listen to nonfiction as audiobooks, and I listen to them when I'm in the car. I believe I mentioned this in my last video, but I did start grad school this year, and while I do have a decent drive to school, it's pretty trafficy, so I tend not to listen to my audiobooks then because I don't really feel like I can be distracted when I'm driving to school. So I'm not listening to as many audiobooks as I have before. One of my goals this year is to read more nonfiction, so hopefully this will change. But for the grand scheme of things, I finished a total of one nonfiction book, and it was Bad Blood by John Carreyrou, which was amazing. I highly recommend it. My top author for the year was Presley Hall, and if you watched my previous video, you probably noticed that I read her entire backlist in 2022. I absolutely love the format that she uses. It is essentially the same story each time, but that's something that I personally enjoy about romance. I like knowing that my stories have a happy ending. I am not a sad ending romance person. I am not I don't want my romances to be kind of fraught with tension. I want them to have a happy ending. I want everyone to be in love and having babies and living together for the rest of their lives. Also, the top 3 that I read are all sci-fi romance authors. So all of those authors pretty much write strictly sci-fi romance. Ruby Dixon writes sci-fi romance as well as a fantasy romance series. So I wasn't surprised by my top authors. I was surprised that Logan Chance made it on the list. I noticed the difference reading a romance written by a male author versus a female author. That's not to say that it's a bad thing, just that I saw the difference, and I also saw the difference in my enjoyment of the books, maybe because the writing style was different or because it was written by a male author. I'm not sure what exactly the reason is, but something that I'm going to be keeping in mind, for next year and for the future. So now I'm going to go through the charts that I have in my reading spreadsheet. These charts are based on data that I input into the spreadsheet throughout my year as I'm reading. And I'm only going to show a few of the charts that I selected for this year's data review, simply because a lot of the other charts are a bit repetitive. They show the same information in different formats. And I also noticed that some of the charts are really overwhelmed with kind of like the main genre that I was reading in, or the main format that I was reading in. I mostly read romance and I mostly read ebooks. So some of the charts just look a little silly because they're so outweighed by those two categories that the rest of the information doesn't really make sense because you just can't see it. I'm going to put up the charts here for you as I go through them so that you can see the different numbers that I'm talking about. So the first information that I am going to look at today is going to be the author's gender identity. So this is based on information from interviews, from author bios, things like that. So if I didn't know, I did not assume and I put unknown. However, this year I did take note of pronouns in author bios as well. So if a bio used he, him, or she, her, I assigned either male or female to that author when I was recording their gender. So the breakdown looks like this. As you can see, 94% of my books were written by female authors. Only 5% of my books were written by male authors, and just under 1% of my books were written by non-binary authors. So as you can see, we skew heavily to the female side. I don't feel bad about that personally. I mean, I'm reading romance. I really prefer reading from a female point of view. Next up, we have for the actual books that I read, the protagonist gender. I'll put that up right here. You can see that the yellow is ensemble, and that takes up the majority of the pie by far. That's just shy of 87% of my reads. That's because I personally prefer dual point of view romances. I don't love a high amount of angst. So for me, knowing what's going on in both characters' heads is really important when it comes to enjoying a romance. So because of that, almost 87% of my romance reads, of my reads total, were ensembles. For the remaining, we had just under 9% were female main characters, and then 3.5% were male main characters, and the remaining about 1% were non-applicable. And the reason it was non-applicable was because it was either nonfiction or it was not about a particular person. So if there was no discernible main character, then it was non-applicable. Next up, I'm going to be looking at the diversity that the book had. So as you can see here, I did a pretty good job. I think I did a pretty good job this year. I'm not sure how some of my diversity categories are going to shift in 2023. I renamed some of them as I was going through 2022 as it was. So about 48.5% of my books had no major themes of diversity. It doesn't mean that there was absolutely no diversity in the book. Because I'm going with the not like me aspect, I think that's why some of my categories feel a little awkward to me. Basically, I'm thinking about renaming some of the categories in my diversity column. If you have suggestions for something that I could include or something you'd want to know more specifically, please let me know in the comments. So about 48.5% of the books had no major diversity or discernible diversity, or it wasn't said outright that somebody had a mental illness or had a chronic illness or was not white. And then I also included some of the breakdown information. So we can see that the largest pieces of the pie, if you will, 10.5% of my books contained some sort of major mental illness for the main character or for one of the main secondary characters. And then again, with about 10.5%, we have BIPOC, so that means that one of the main characters was not white. I would like to break that down a little bit more or make it not as general. I know that there are some people in different communities that are not white that don't consider themselves to kind of fall under the BIPOC umbrella, or they feel like BIPOC might be a term or a label that white people have created for people that are just not like them. So if you think that I should break that down more, let me know. I'm open to changing it for this coming year. About 9% had a disability. This for me meant a physical disability, not including deafness or chronic illnesses. So for me, I have a chronic illness myself, so chronic illness is separate because it's really not the same as having a physical disability. Physical disability was missing limb, severe scarring, something about the main character or secondary character's physical appearance that made them feel different. For the deafness category, I did separate that out because I consider that to be its own culture, because it typically includes their own language via American Sign Language since I'm in the US. And then we have a couple other main categories as well. My LGBT plus category saw about 3% this year, which is higher than last year, but I still feel like it should be more to be representative, of people. And then I have about 1.5% of my books being about women's issues. So that means that they explicitly addressed some sort of sexual harassment, misogyny, sexism in the workplace, things along those lines. And then we have 3% being neurodivergent. So that means a character explicitly stated that they had a learning difference, they had a learning disability, or that they were autistic or on the autism spectrum. I just read The Co-op by Tara DeWitt, and the female main character has dyslexia, and she states that. So I would put that in neurodivergent. And then my last little sliver is own voices. So next up, we have our setting in terms of where the book took place and where the story was happening. I did originally try to use a geomap for this, but as you can see, it wasn't very descriptive. And the reason that it wasn't very descriptive is because over 60% of my books happened in a book-based universe. So that's, again, the sci-fi romances. Almost all of them took place in outer space, and so I consider that to be a book-based setting. It's not something that's realistic or that can be plotted on a map. But for the areas that could be plotted on a map, a majority of those books did take place in the United States. So we have United States with 23.4%, by far the majority. We have the United Kingdom coming in next with 4.8%. Third, we have Russia with 3.6%. And then we have the next discernible chunk as Italy, which was 2.4%. A couple of my books included multiple countries. I had one book that was set in Spain, one in Ireland, one in Australia, and one in France. I think for 2023, I want most of my books to be outside of the US, whether that's 51% or 99%, as long as less than 50% of my books are set in the US, I'm going to be really happy. But I am going to be tracking that statistic specifically month by month so that I know if I need to really branch out in the months afterwards to kind of even out the pie. The final chart that we are going to be looking at this year is going to be the genre and sub-genre categories. no surprise to anybody, we have 93.7 of my books in romance as their main genre. I was happy to see that my next highest was mystery because I did start reading the Agatha Christie books last year. That's something that I decided to do after watching Books Like Whoa reread all of the Agatha Christie books, and then also How to Train Your Gavin has been reading some of the Agatha Christie books, and then the remaining are historical fiction, nonfiction, sci-fi, and general fiction. I would love to see a little bit less in the romance and a little bit more in the nonfiction. I know. It's basically blasphemy for my channel because almost all that I read is romance. I want to be happy when I'm reading, and happily ever afters make me happy. So sue me. So my goal for this next year is to lower my romance percentage from 93 to 75%. I think that alone is going to be a huge challenge, but we're going to try it. We're going to see how it goes. For my subgenres, I have quite a good mix, I think. You can see it right here. I know I've talked a lot about sci-fi romances. In my last video, it was almost all sci-fi romances, and you definitely see that reflected here. So we have 59% of my books were sci-fi romance. That also includes my 4 top authors, so it's really not a surprise. I got a little bit hooked this past year, I'm not gonna lie. It's fine. It's fine. I think we're moving into a contemporary romance phase with some more recent releases, so we'll see how the year goes. My second biggest chunk when it comes to my subgenres was contemporary romance. That really started hitting at the beginning of 2022, so that was definitely Melanie Harlow, which we saw a ton of. We have mafia romance and pro-athlete romance taking up the next 2 biggest chunks. We also saw Golden Age detective, Amish romance, chick lit this past year. I had a smidgen of historical fiction, dystopian, and I also created a separate category for the Dear America Diary books. So the final statistic or bit of information that I wanted to include in this year's data wrap up is that I started my year last year with 47 books on my physical TBR, part of which you can see behind me, and I ended the year with 87 books on my physical TBR. So I actually didn't read any of the books on my physical TBR last year, which I'm not proud of. I really want to focus on reading my physical TBR this year, so I'm hoping to get it down from 87 to somewhere in the 50s or 60s. Realistically, I know that I love reading on Kindle Unlimited, and I know that I love my Kindle Unlimited romances, but I am hoping to at least have a physical book in hand for about a quarter of the time. So I'm really excited and proud to announce that I'm going to be showing you my 2023 reading spreadsheet, which is available for you to make a copy of and use in Google Sheets. It's available in the description box below. It's available on my website in the cards up here, and it's also available as a link from my website directly. So any way that you want to get the information, you will be able to get that from me and utilize it. You're able to customize all of the category fields. So I will be walking you through that spreadsheet and showing you all of the things that I keep track of and that I hope you keep track of as well. Okay, so to get started, we have our dashboard. So every time you open up the spreadsheet, you're going to see just the thanks to Brock Roberts, who originally created this. The last time he updated it was in 2020, and I've been updating it myself since then. So his motto was, today a reader, tomorrow a leader, and although he hasn't really uploaded recently, I still wanted to give him the original credit. So all of the categories right now in the acquisitions and book survey are going to be blank, but I will show you what I have and how you can use it. Your reading goal progress will be based on the goal that you have for the year and the actual books that you have recorded in this year's book survey tab. So as you read, the bar graph will go up, and so will the line chart. So the bars will be showing you about how many books per month you need to read to stay on track. And the line will show you whether or not you're meeting those goals, falling below them, or surpassing them. I also keep the monthly spending on my dashboard because I try being the operative word, to stick to a budget when it comes to my books, and I also tend to spend in spurts. So I will wait, about 2 or 3 months, and then I'll do a bigger book haul 1 month at a time. So this shows you what your spending is month to month. It does not track your monthly subscriptions that you have. So if you subscribe to Audible, Book of the Month, Kindle Unlimited, if your library card has a fee, it does not include that. This is all of your additional spending. So if you buy a book at Half Price Books for $4.99 in January, it will show $4.99 spent in January. It also helps you see if you're an even spender, if you spend in spurts like I do, or if you don't really spend at all. And then when Barnes & Noble has their half price hardcover sale, you go crazy. So I like to keep track of that. It keeps me a little bit more accountable to what I'm spending and what my actual budget is. Finally, on the dashboard, we have this reading progress bar. Right now it's completely full because the current goal in the spreadsheet is blank and the number of books is 0. So it looks as though I've met my goal. This will fill up slowly like a thermometer would as you read books throughout the year. So if I put in my goal of 150 books and I read 50 books in my book survey tab, it will show 1/3 of the way full. So that math is done for you automatically, and it also updates automatically as you add in your books. Our second tab that we have is our Start tab. This is the most important to fill out because this is where the formulas pull from to see if you're meeting your goals and how much you are spending. So it pretty much says everything you need to know. You'll fill out your reading goal, your monthly reading goal if it's different than your yearly reading goal, what your current TBR pile is. So for me, it would be 87. Your monthly budget, and then what your library card fee is. There's also available spaces for other book subscriptions. This could be like a Fairy Loot box. It could be Book of the Month, Kindle Unlimited. You can change the titles and then you type in the dollar amount. And if you want to add them in your spending budget, you just click the checkbox and it will automatically tally that for you in the summary tab. For our categories, we have quite a few. Every category is listed out that's used in the acquisitions, the book survey, the summary, and the charts tabs. So all of those tabs pull from this category section. The most important thing if you add something is to not drag and drop the order because it will break the formulas. So if you want to add something, let's say in your age groups, instead of adult, young adult, middle grade, and children's, you want to add picture book, or you want to add reference because you feel like reference doesn't have an age group. Feel free to add that below and just know that it will then show up as the last item on the list. Our next tab we have is our series tab. So this looks a lot different than what I had it as previously. I used to not even track my series because I would just get obsessed with an author and read their entire backlist, so I never felt like I needed to break the series out separately. But this year I decided I wanted to start tracking those a little bit more closely. That way I would know if a book was coming out soon or in the year 2023 to continue a series that I've previously read. So under the series section, you would put the name of the series, the author of the series, whether or not the author has finished writing the series, and then whether or not you've finished reading the series. So as you put in the titles of the books, You can also color code them to show what year they are. This should say 2020. Someone fix that. So it will show which year you read the book in. So if you read the first book in 2020, you would highlight this cell light yellow like it is up here in the color coding chart. You're free to change these colors if you want to. You're free to make them something completely different. Maybe you want to use a strike through. Maybe you want to change the font. Totally up to you. Next tab we have is our acquisitions tab. Now the acquisitions and the book survey tabs are very similar, but they track two completely different things. So acquisitions are going to be books that you've acquired, whether it's getting them from a friend, as a gift, buying them in a bookstore, borrowing them from the library, borrowing them from Kindle Unlimited, checking them out on Audible, getting them in a fairy loot box. Anything that you do, any book that comes into your possession should be recorded here. And the reason for that is because the summary page breaks out acquisitions and books read into completely different charts. So you might have 200 books that you acquire, and of those 200, you might only read 10. You don't want those statistics mixing together, so they are two separate tabs. So you put the date that you received the book, the title, the author, the age group it was meant for, the genre, subgenre, length, format, publisher, publishing imprint, the author's identity, physical or digital, how it was acquired, so this is that friend lend, purchase, library, etc. Whether the book is new or used, how much the book cost you. So this is where if I'm checking out from the library or if I'm getting a book on Kindle Unlimited, the first book of the month for Kindle Unlimited, I might put $10.59, and the rest of the books I'm going to put as $0 because it's not costing me anything to borrow those other books. In the list price, I will look and see what the paperback price is on Kindle Unlimited, and if that's not available, I will use the Barnes & Noble link hardcover list price. So if it's not sold by Barnes & Noble, I'll use the next largest retailer. Your savings will be automatically calculated, and those savings will be added up in the summary charts for the end of the year. The last few columns are not filled out for every book, but if you read the book, where you borrowed it from, the due date if it was a library book, and whether or not you returned the book. If the due date passes and you've not returned the book, it will turn red. So it's a good reminder to get the book back if you still need to. And then we have our book survey tab. So like I said, this tab is very similar to our acquisitions tab. However, the book survey tab is for the books that you have read and completed in 2023. All of this information is going to be added up in the summary and the charts for you to take a look at whenever you want. So this is where I track the title of the book and the dates that I read it. So getting back to the beginning here, we have our title, our start date, our finish date, the status, so whether or not you're currently reading or you did not finish. If you want to, you can also mark them currently reading or returned unread. I don't use returned unread because I only put books in here that I've already started. So if I had to return it, I would just leave it as currently reading until I checked it out again. If the end of the year comes around and I still haven't finished the book, then it goes into did not finish for me. The author, the author's gender, the protagonist gender, the age group that it's intended for, genre, subgenre, length, format, if it's an audiobook, narrator hours, and pages per hour, whether or not it's a physical or digital book, the pages, the publication year. For this, I use original publication year, so if I'm reading an Agatha Christie and it was published in 1926, even if I'm reading a copy that was republished in 2021, I will put 1926 as the publication year. The main publisher, the imprint of the publisher, the rating, which is based on the caw pile system, how I acquired the book, whether it was new or used, the author's identity. So this is where we're looking at the racial subgroup that the author identifies with. Again, we have unknown just in case. Whether or not it's part of a series, if so, what book number, if it contains any type of diversity, what country the book is set in. So this could be a book-based country or it could be a multi-country. So book-based would be like our sci-fi or fantasy, and then multi-country would be if there's not a main country that the book takes place in. If it's 50-50 in the States and China, I would put multi-country. If it's 60% China, 40% the States, I would put China. The original language, whether or not it was translated, the translator if applicable, and then the author's location. This is where I added in author state for this year. So if they're in the US, I am trying to put the state. I'd like to read books from all 50 states by the end of the year, so that's one of the ways that I'm tracking it. And then whether or not it happened on Earth, so that helps to see, for me, you know, is it completely fantasy? Does Earth exist in any way? So in a lot of my sci-fi romances, they would have a reference to Earth in the book because it was human women that were like stolen from Earth. In the Red Rising series, they reference Earth because they went from Earth to the moon to Mars. So then you would say yes in this section. You could say no if you wanted to. If it doesn't take place on Earth at all, it's totally up to you. And then whether or not it was part of my original TBR. So for rereads, I put rereads. If it says yes, it will subtract from my TBR for the year. It automatically calculates how many days it took you to read the book. And then we have the caw pile system with an automatic ranking there. On the final caw pile ranking, I have it broken down to show what Book Riot uses for the caw pile system. So you can see what that translates to on a 5-star scale. If you want to do your caw pile and 5-star rankings separately, that's totally your choice. I'm choosing to integrate the two because my first instinct for a rating is usually not what the caw pile ends up being. The second to last page that I want to show is the summary page. So this takes all of the information that you put into the various pages and it summarizes it. So this has been completely updated for 2023. It automatically pulls in from the category list, which is why you can change the items in the categories but not drag and drop them to reorder them. And it really just is an amalgamation of all the different data that you could possibly want to know. So this is something that has to be updated by hand every year, and I've been doing that for the past 3 years. I will continue to do so in the future so long as you are all interested. It really just breaks down all of the different pieces of information, and then the charts pull from these tables. So when you click over to the charts tab, as you start filling out some of the summary pages, you'll see more of that information being pulled into charts and kind of broken down visually into some different ways. Finally, we have our release tracker. So this is just an easy way to keep track of any 2023 releases that you are looking forward to buying. So title, author, release date, whether or not you've pre-ordered it, the date that you ended up purchasing the book, and then the link to the pre-order if that's something that you are interested in doing. So going back to our dashboard, you can see that there's a lot of information on this sheet. Again, it was initially created by Brock Roberts, so I'm not taking any personal credit for creating a bulk of this information. I really didn't. That's also why I'm offering it for free on my website and in the description. So if it is a format that you're interested in, if there's data that you want to track that I'm tracking, please feel free. Again, go ahead, open that link, make yourself a copy, save it in your Google Drive, and let me know in the comments how you are tracking your reading this year in 2023, and if there's any data that you want me to add to my tracking so that we can look at it and kind of compare it over last year's at the end of the year. It was great hanging out with you guys today. Again, stay safe, make good choices, and have a good night. Bye! Oh, what the heck was that, Jessie? My thumbnail! Charts galore! Should I do bloopers every video? I don't know. not really bloopers, but